Tanekomara. My name is Sage Blake. I'm a wanderer, storyteller, artist amateur, and this ain't your grandpappy's Minesweeper. This is Mine Dungeon 2, Rurumu's Trip. This game kind of just appeared out of nowhere, honestly. It's scheduled for release in September of this year. Though, how do I put this? The game advertises itself as Minesweeper meets action game, and it's only mostly right on that assessment. Yes, it does have you controlling the character while you're on a physical map, but just because you're controlling a character actively doesn't make it an action game per se. I'll get into that when we get into the gameplay, but the first thing that you're immediately going to recognize the moment you start up the game is likely going to be the absolutely questionable translations. There's a reason for that. That being two things. One, this company, Cell Lab, only has 2 releases that have been translated into English. Those being this game and the another game whose title escapes me. I'll put an annotation. Regardless, only 2 games that have been translated to English, and yeah. Second, this is a Chinese game. Make of that what you will, but there have been just as many Japanese and Korean games, or Eastern games period, that have suffered from having poor translations. This case happens to be one of those cases where it's especially apparent. As a result, it's a little tricky to figure out what exactly characters are saying and when they're saying it, or even the story in general. Especially since the original game didn't have too much of a story to begin with, I think? Again, I don't really know, honestly, but it does exist, and you can buy it on Steam for the very, very cheap price of 99 cents. This game, I assume, would only maybe be, at worst, $3. Or at least when it fully releases. But again, it's Minesweeper, essentially. So it's relatively easy to grasp, relatively easy to figure out. Of course, that's not gonna stop me from completely failing, and flailing at that. I'm gonna be putting up the perfect runs of almost every stage that I do, the exceptions being the tutorial stages, because they're tutorial, it doesn't really matter. And the reason for that is because this game uses a rating system. For each and every stage in the game, you get stars depending on how well you perform. You get 1 for clearing a stage within a time limit, you get 1 for clearing a stage without taking damage, and you get 1 for clearing a stage without using the search bullet. We'll get to that in a bit. In terms of gameplay, well, again, it's Minesweeper. If you're unfamiliar, essentially, the first time you uncover a box, a whole bunch of boxes end up being uncovered, and some of those have numbers on them. Boxes with numbers say, okay, there are this many mines that are within a 1-space radius, including diagonals, from that specific tile. So if it has a 1, then one of the spaces around that 1 is going to have a mine. Your objective is to mark off every single mine, and yeah, that's about it. Of course, that can be an easier task than, as I said, than done. But it depends on how things stack up. Fortunately, our main character here, the titular Rurumu, is very well equipped with a variety of means to not only detect mines, but also help you keep track of things and make it easier to discover them. The first of which that the tutorials go into is your destruction bullet. You can use the destruction bullet to take down obstacles such as trees and slimes. This will make it easier to figure out whether there are mines nearby, because it's guaranteed, and the game never tells you this sadly, that any object you destroy will not have a mine underneath it. So if you're unsure about whether there are going to be mines around, it's probably a good idea to check for various obstacles and clear them out of the way. That way you can figure out what you're going to be doing next. Your other bullet is the search bullet that I mentioned before. Search Bullet will immediately uncover everything within a 3x3 area. It's very useful for beginners, but it does give you a score penalty, a pretty drastic one at that, and it also prevents you from getting a full 3-star rank on a stage. Again, I'm going to be showing off only my perfect stage runs for the first half of this video, and the latter half is just going to be a complete failtage of all of my bungling. If you like that sort of thing, by all means, take a look at it. But as a result, there isn't much to talk about for this game. It's, well, I'm going to be saying this repeatedly, Minesweeper. If you've likely played it on old Microsoft computers, and if you haven't, it's relatively easy to find and dig up at any given point in time. Although, this game does have a few quirks in it that are a little different. For one, again, you're controlling a character on the map as opposed to just a generic cursor. As a result, you need to be very careful as to where you place yourself in a stage, because one wrong move and you're going to be stepping on a mine and you're going to lose HP. Fortunately though, unlike with typical Minesweeper, you're allowed to make a bunch of mistakes. 3 at outset, and there are power-ups that you can unlock by spending stars that you get from clearing stages that will increase your health even further, or grant other perks like accelerating or decelerating your character, or maybe even granting you more ammo to destroy terrain with or search for mines. There are a couple other gimmicks in this game as well. As I've mentioned, there are obstacles, but one of the bigger obstacles that you're going to encounter is, well, other than the trees, slimes. Slimes are interesting in that they completely obscure any and all numbers that are within their 1 square radius. So it's going to be ideal in some cases to destroy slimes in order to see the field more properly. Of course, that's why you need to make sure you're constantly judging whether you're not to use your destruction bullets, because you only get a limited amount of them. If you end up spending them all too early, then you're going to be outright screwed in the later maps, because you're going to have to rely on, well, luck. Put bluntly, there are many opportunities in this game that are coin flips, and you're going to be seeing that especially in the failtage that comes at the end of this. I have the absolute worst luck. It's kind of a running gag with me that I have the absolute worst luck imaginable when it comes to video games, or just life in general. This is especially apparent in this game, where so many times I end up having to rely on a coin flip or lesser odds just to hope to the gods that I didn't step on a mine. And even when the odds are astronomically low, I still somehow manage to get my ass wiped. Thanks, life. I really appreciate you. And thanks, game, for just hammering how unlucky I am. Though it's not 100% my fault, however. There are some odd quirks with the game. The first of which being, there's no pause menu during a stage. Which is a really interesting problem. Like, you wouldn't think it's a problem at first, but trust me when I say it is. Specifically because if you get hit, it means that in order to retry a stage, you have to force yourself to get hit multiple times, and then, well, suffer game over. But more importantly, you're not just suffering game over, but you also have to quit out of the stage, because the second issue that you run into is with the retry option. For one reason or another, Cell Lab decided that if you end up running out of HP, you can retry immediately from the map that you're currently on, which is nice. But you're always going to have 1 HP when you do retry, so what's the point? I mean, chances are, the reason why you made so many errors was because you made multiple errors in a stage. And as a result, having to retry that particular bit of the stage with only 1 HP is quite the nerf, especially if you came into the stage with max HP in the first place. You're also going to note that every stage has multiple mini-stages within it. Typically it's 3 for the terms of this demo, but likely that'll change in the future. You'll want to be very, very careful with how you spend your resources, and also how you're moving from map to map. Because your resources won't refresh until you've completely cleared a chapter map. Another little aspect that is going to be very important to master is that of terrain. There are several instances where there will be raised or lowered terrain in the battlefield, and by stepping on the slopes, you'll be able to uncover tiles immediately that are within a one-space radius from where you step. It's a good idea generally to, if a map has raised terrain, step on as many of these sloped areas as possible, that way you can see whether or not the raised area has any traps on it. It's going to be very important for you to do so in order to fully uncover every single mine, because, again, you have to uncover every single mine and mark it as such. Otherwise, you won't be able to leave the stage. That means either blowing yourself up, or actually designating whether or not it's a trap. And again, you can only mark so many traps at a time, so you're going to have to pay careful attention to your surroundings. But that itself leads into a different type of issue, one that's much more threatening to the gameplay. And that issue is your controls. See, the game is supposed to operate in a tile-based system. You tap on an arrow key or direction on your controller, and you move one tile in that direction. The problem is, it's not an immediate movement, it's a gradual movement, which means that there are many instances where your muscle memory is going to be fighting you, and again, it's specifically because this game totes itself as a quote-unquote action game, that you're going to be thinking, okay, I could just immediately turn around, but nope! Nope, if you just end up holding down a direction for a little too long, you're not going to be moving just one tile, you're going to be moving two. And that means you can easily end up in situations where you get injured. This happens a lot, and it's very frustrating when it does happen. It would have been nicer, in my opinion, if instead of going by a tile-based movement system, they allowed you to move freely on the grid and just let you snap to certain squares in order to fire off shots and whatnot whenever you hold down your aim button. I do remember a game off the top of my head which did operate on a tile-based system. It was a shooter too, kind of, sort of thing. But if you reached the peak of your movement, then you wouldn't be able to move into any other tiles. You'd be stuck with whatever tile you decide to end your turn on. That wouldn't exactly work here, but something similar where you automatically center yourself in a tile every time you hit the aim button would be really nice. Because, again, I've had many moments where I've just run off into danger accidentally, and it's been frustrating trying to get the 3-star rank. Because I'm a perfectionist! That aside, the game overall looks kinda nice. It looks a bit like a mobile game in places, but honestly, that's fine considering it's going to be at a cheap price anyway. And in terms of gameplay, it's fairly solid, all things considered. Just, again, I wouldn't exactly call it an action game per se, specifically because you're just moving around a character. Is it a strategy game? I'd say so, considering it's incorporating elements of Minesweeper, but also trying to put its own spin on things. In general, though, that's about all I could say about it. Other than the fact that I'm probably not going to be buying this game in the future, mostly because it doesn't exactly meet my need of depth for a game. It's simple and easy to pick up, yeah, but I want something meatier. It's just how I am as a person. So with that settled, I guess it's time for me to return to the void. Tune in next week when we take a look at another game on Preview Purview, and see just exactly whether it's a hidden gem or maybe just should remain hidden. Till again, have a good night.
Holy Jesus.